Have you ever walked away from a conversation smiling, only to feel something heavy settle inside your chest a few moments later? You can't explain it. Nothing obvious was said, no insults, no shouting, no direct attack. Yet something feels wrong. Long before you consciously decide whether to trust someone, your mind has already begun making calculations that you are completely unaware of. Every conversation is filled with signals that move too quickly for logic to capture in real time. A slight pause before answering a simple question. A smile that appears a second too late. A compliment that somehow leaves you feeling inferior instead of appreciated. A confident statement that doesn't quite match the speaker's body language. These tiny details seem meaningless when viewed individually, but your subconscious mind does not evaluate them one by one. It gathers them together, searching for patterns that your conscious awareness has not yet recognized. This is why you sometimes leave a conversation with an uncomfortable feeling that you cannot explain. Nothing openly hostile happened. No one insulted you. There was no argument, no raised voice, and no obvious reason to feel unsettled. It's something inside you refuses to let the interaction go. Hours later, you replay the conversation in your mind, trying to understand why it continues to bother you. Most people dismiss this feeling because they cannot immediately justify it with facts. They convince themselves that they are imagining things or being overly suspicious. In doing so, they silence one of the most sophisticated warning systems they possess. Your subconscious is constantly observing details that your conscious mind ignores. It notices inconsistencies between words and actions. It remembers previous behaviors that seem unrelated in the moment. It detects emotional shifts in another person's tone before you consciously hear them. It compares present experiences with thousands of past interactions stored in memory. This process happens automatically, without asking for your permission or demanding your attention. By the time your conscious mind begins asking questions, your deeper instincts have already reached a preliminary conclusion based on countless pieces of information. Think about how often you have looked back at a relationship and realized the warning signs were there from the beginning. The manipulation did not suddenly appear. The dishonesty was not created overnight. The arrogance was visible in subtle moments that seemed too small to matter. At the time, you ignored them because each individual incident appeared insignificant. Only later, after enough evidence had accumulated, did the pattern become impossible to deny. What you call hindsight is often your subconscious reminding you that it recognized the danger long before your conscious mind accepted it. People often believe intelligence means relying only on logic, but logic is limited by the information it can clearly explain. Your instincts are not irrational enemies of reason. They are often reason operating beneath the surface, processing more information than conscious thought can comfortably handle at once. The problem arises when people assume that anything they cannot immediately explain must therefore be false. They demand absolute proof before allowing themselves to acknowledge discomfort. Meanwhile, those skilled at manipulation thrive within that delay, knowing that confusion buys them time. The most effective deceivers rarely reveal themselves through dramatic actions. Instead, they depend on subtle contradictions that seem too insignificant to confront. They may speak warmly while displaying quiet contempt. They may praise you publicly while diminishing you privately. They may present themselves as trustworthy while repeatedly avoiding accountability in ways that are difficult to articulate. Your conscious mind struggles to organize these contradictions because each one appears too minor to justify concern. Your subconscious, however, keeps adding them together until a pattern begins to emerge. This is why the feeling after a conversation deserves your attention. It is not a final judgment, nor is it undeniable proof that someone has harmful intentions. It is simply a signal inviting you to observe more carefully instead of dismissing your own perception. The feeling itself is not the conclusion, it is the beginning of awareness. Born from countless observations, your conscious mind has yet to fully understand one of the most revealing truths about any relationship has very little to do with what was actually said during a conversation. Instead, it is found in how you feel after the conversation has ended. Most people judge others by their words, their confidence or their charm. They remember the jokes, the compliments, the advice, and the promises. Yet words can be carefully chosen, rehearsed, and strategically delivered. Feelings are much harder to fake. The emotional state someone leaves you with often reveals more about their influence than anything they openly express. Pay close attention to the energy you carry when you walk away from someone. Do you feel lighter, calmer, and more confident, or do you feel mentally exhausted without understanding why? Do you suddenly begin questioning your own decisions, replaying every sentence in your mind, or wondering if you somehow said the wrong thing? These reactions are not meaningless. They are clues. Every interaction leaves an emotional residue, and that residue tells a story your conscious mind may not immediately recognize. There are people whose presence naturally expands your thinking. After speaking with them, your ideas become clearer. You feel motivated to pursue your goals. Even when they challenge you, they do so in a way that strengthens your confidence rather than weakens it. They make you think, but they do not make you doubt your worth. They correct your mistakes without attacking your identity. They offer honesty without humiliation. Conversations with such people may be difficult at times. They leave you feeling stronger because they are built built on mutual respect rather than subtle control. Then there are people who create the opposite effect. They smile while making remarks that quietly diminish your achievements. They disguise criticism as concern. They ask questions that sound innocent but leave you feeling guilty or defensive. They interrupt your excitement with skepticism. They constantly redirect attention toward themselves or find subtle ways to remind you of your shortcomings. Nothing they say seems openly cruel, yet somehow every interaction leaves you carrying a weight that was not there before. This emotional drain rarely happens all at once. It accumulates over time. One conversation leaves you slightly uncertain. Another makes you apologize for something that was never your responsibility. A third causes you to question decisions you were once confident about. Eventually, you begin assuming that the problem must be you because each individual moment appears too small to justify concern. This is how many people slowly lose confidence without ever experiencing a single dramatic confrontation. Energy is difficult to measure, but it is impossible to ignore once you begin observing it honestly. Notice whether you feel encouraged to express yourself freely or whether you constantly monitor every word, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Observe whether you feel accepted for who you are or pressured to become someone else. Healthy relationships create emotional safety. Unhealthy ones create emotional tension. Even silence feels different depending on the person sitting across from you. Around some individuals, silence feels peaceful. Around others, it feels like waiting for criticism to arrive. Many people become trapped because they confuse familiarity with comfort. They assume that if someone has always been part of their life, then the exhaustion they feel afterward is simply normal. They stop questioning why certain conversations consistently leave them anxious while others leave them inspired. Over time, they adapt to emotional depletion until they no longer recognize what genuine encouragement feels like. This is why it is essential to become a careful observer of your own emotional responses. Instead of analyzing only the other person's behavior, study your own internal state after every meaningful interaction. Your emotions are constantly providing information about whether someone adds clarity to your life or quietly erodes your peace. The body often recognizes emotional truth long before the mind finds the words to explain it. Those quiet changes in your energy, confidence, and mental clarity deserve attention because they reveal influences that polished words and charming personalities often succeed in hiding. Few experiences are more unsettling than leaving a conversation feeling confused when you entered it completely certain of your own thoughts. Before the discussion began, your opinions were clear, your memories felt accurate, and your decisions made sense. Yet somehow, by the time the conversation ends, everything feels uncertain. You begin replaying every sentence in your head. You wonder whether you misunderstood what was said. You question whether your reactions were unreasonable. You even start apologizing for things you never believed were your responsibility. This kind of confusion is rarely random. More often than people realize, it is the result of subtle psychological influence that slowly weakens your confidence without appearing openly hostile. Manipulation does not always arrive through aggression or obvious deception. The most effective forms are quiet, patient, and almost invisible. Instead of forcing you to believe something, they encourage you to doubt yourself. They rarely tell you directly that you are wrong. Instead, they ask questions that make you second-guess your memory. They repeat small criticisms until they begin to sound like facts. They change the subject whenever they are challenged. They avoid giving direct answers while making you feel responsible for the confusion that follows. The conversation becomes so tangled that you stop searching for the truth and begin searching for a way to end the discomfort. One of the most powerful psychological tactics is creating uncertainty. A confident person is difficult to control because they trust their own judgment. A confused person constantly seeks reassurance from others. Once someone begins depending on another person's interpretation of reality, influence becomes much easier. That is why certain individuals do not aim to win arguments with facts. They aim to create enough uncertainty that you eventually surrender your confidence without realizing it. Notice how these conversations often follow the same pattern. You raise a simple concern, but instead of addressing it directly, the other person shifts the focus toward your emotions. Suddenly, the discussion is no longer about what happened, but about whether your feelings are valid. They may suggest that you are imagining things, exaggerating, or being overly sensitive. They speak with complete certainty while treating your perspective as unreliable. Gradually, you begin questioning yourself more than you question them. This confusion becomes even stronger when mixed with occasional kindness. A manipulative person may criticize you one moment and praise you the next. They alternate between warmth and distance, approval and disappointment. Because the positive moments feel rewarding, you begin overlooking the confusing ones. Your mind starts working harder to earn their approval, believing that if you simply communicate better or behave differently, the relationship will return to its peaceful moments. In reality, the inconsistency itself often becomes the source of control. Healthy conversations produce greater understanding, even when disagreements exist. exist. Two people may leave with different opinions, but both understand each other's positions more clearly than before. Respect remains intact because honesty is valued more than victory. Unhealthy conversations produce the opposite effect. The original issue becomes buried beneath misunderstandings, emotional pressure, and endless explanations. Hours later, you are still mentally replaying the discussion, searching for clarity that never arrived. People who manipulate through confusion often rely on your desire to appear reasonable. They know you will continue explaining yourself while they provide fewer and fewer clear answers. The more you defend your intentions, the less attention is given to their behavior. The conversation quietly shifts until you are carrying the burden of proving your innocence while they avoid accountability altogether. This imbalance leaves you mentally exhausted because your energy has been spent solving a problem that was intentionally made more complicated than it needed to be. Whenever confusion becomes the consistent outcome of your interactions with the same person, it deserves careful attention. Temporary misunderstandings happen in every relationship, but repeated mental fog after ordinary conversations often signals that something deeper is taking place. Clarity builds trust, while constant confusion slowly dissolves it, making you dependent on someone else's version of reality instead of your own perception and judgment. Confidence is rarely destroyed in a single dramatic moment. It is usually weakened through countless ordinary conversations that seem harmless on the surface. Most people imagine that confidence disappears because of major failures, public humiliation, or obvious criticism. While those experiences certainly have an impact, the quieter influences are often far more dangerous. The words you hear every day, the people you spend time with, and the emotional atmosphere surrounding your conversations slowly shape the way you see yourself. That is why every meaningful interaction should be measured not only by what was discussed, but by what it did to your confidence after it ended. Think about the people who consistently make you feel capable. They do not flatter you with empty praise or tell you that you are perfect. Instead, they recognize your strengths while encouraging you to improve your weaknesses. They challenge your ideas without attacking your character. They correct your mistakes without making you feel insignificant. After speaking with them, you may have learned something difficult, but you leave believing that you are capable of becoming better. Their honesty strengthens your self-respect because it comes from a place of genuine respect rather than hidden competition. Now consider the opposite type of person. Every conversation with them seems to leave a small crack in your confidence. They interrupt your achievements with comparisons. When you share good news, they immediately remind you of someone doing even better. When you express excitement about a new opportunity, they quietly predict failure. If you make progress, they minimize it. If you make a mistake, they magnify it. Their words may appear logical, even practical, but the emotional effect is always the same. You walk away feeling smaller than when you arrived. This process is so subtle that many people never recognize it. They assume they are simply becoming more realistic or more humble. In truth, they are slowly accepting another person's low opinion of their potential. Confidence does not disappear because someone insults you once. It fades because repeated conversations train you to question your own abilities until self-doubt becomes your normal state of mind. One of the clearest signs of a healthy relationship is that it leaves room for growth without destroying self-belief. Strong mentors, trusted friends, and supportive partners understand that people improve through encouragement combined with accountability. They point out areas for improvement, but they never make you feel as though your value depends on being flawless. They separate your mistakes from your identity. Failure becomes something you experience, not something you become. In contrast, emotionally unhealthy relationships blur that distinction. A single mistake becomes evidence that you are incapable. One disagreement becomes proof that you are difficult to deal with. A temporary setback is treated as a permanent limitation. Over time, these messages settle into your thinking. You begin speaking to yourself with the same critical voice you once heard from someone else. Their opinions become your inner dialogue, and eventually you no longer need them to undermine your confidence because you have learned to do it yourself. You pay attention to your ambitions after spending time with different people. Do you feel inspired to pursue your goals, or do you suddenly find yourself making excuses before you have even begun? Do your dreams seem achievable, or do they begin to feel unrealistic? Confidence is closely connected to possibility. The people around you either expand your sense of what is possible or quietly convince you to settle for less than you are capable of achieving. Some individuals feel threatened by the confidence of others because it highlights their own insecurities. Rather than improving themselves, they unconsciously attempt to reduce the confidence of those around them. They disguise discouragement as practical advice. They call your ambition unrealistic, your optimism naive, and your determination unnecessary. Their goal is not always intentional harm. Sometimes they simply cannot tolerate seeing someone pursue a future they've already convinced themselves is impossible. Every conversation leaves an invisible mark on your thinking. Some interactions strengthen your belief in your own abilities, while others slowly replace confidence with hesitation. The true value of any relationship is not measured by how entertaining the conversations are or how long they last, but by the person you become after experiencing them repeatedly. Your confidence is one of your greatest internal resources, and the people who deserve a place in your life are those whose presence strengthens it through honesty, respect, and genuine belief in your potential rather than slowly eroding it through subtle doubt and constant discouragement. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that charm is proof of good character. They assume that because someone is confident, funny, generous, or exceptionally likable, that person must also be trustworthy. This belief has led countless people into unhealthy friendships, damaging partnerships, and painful betrayals. Charm is a powerful social skill, but it is not a measure of integrity. In fact, some of the most persuasive individuals use charm precisely because it allows them to lower the defenses of others before revealing their true intentions. Human beings are naturally drawn toward those who make them feel noticed and appreciated. A charming person understands this instinct. They know how to maintain eye contact, how to remember small details, how to give compliments at exactly the right moment, and how to make each person feel uniquely important. These abilities are not inherently bad. They become dangerous only when they are used as tools for personal advantage rather than genuine connection. The problem is that most people stop evaluating someone's character the moment they begin enjoying their personality. The first stage of influence is almost always emotional rather than logical. Before people trust your words, they must first enjoy your presence. Charm creates comfort, and comfort creates openness. Once someone feels emotionally safe, they become less likely to question inconsistencies or recognize warning signs. They begin interpreting every action through the positive image they have already formed. This is why first impressions can be so misleading. A pleasant beginning often blinds people to troubling behavior that appears later. Notice how easily charm changes perception. If a warm and charismatic person interrupts you, you might assume they are simply enthusiastic. If someone less likable does the exact same thing, you may see it as disrespectful. If a charming individual forgets a promise, you excuse it as an honest mistake. If another person behaves similarly, you may immediately question their reliability. Charm has a way of altering judgment, making people interpret the same behavior differently depending on who displays it. Some individuals become experts at creating carefully crafted identities. They know exactly how they want others to perceive them. Around one group, they appear generous. Around another, they become humble. With some people, they present themselves as victims deserving sympathy. With others, they act as confident leaders worthy of admiration. Their personality shifts depending on what gains them the greatest advantage. Because they are skilled at reading people, they often know which version of themselves will receive the strongest approval. The difficulty is that charm often hides inconsistency. A person may speak passionately about honesty while quietly breaking promises. They may preach loyalty while speaking negatively about everyone behind their backs. They may appear kind in public yet become cold and dismissive in private. Those who focus only on appearances rarely notice these contradictions because they are captivated by how pleasant the individual seems during social interactions. Character, however, is revealed not by performance but by consistent behavior across different situations. Observe how someone treats people from whom they have nothing to gain. Watch how they respond when they are frustrated, disappointed, or unable to control the outcome of a situation. Notice whether their kindness remains steady when there is no audience watching. Genuine character does not disappear the moment recognition fades. A person with integrity behaves with respect even when no reward is expected because their values are not dependent on external approval. Time has a unique ability to expose what charm attempts to conceal. Anyone can create an impressive first impression for an hour, a day, or even several weeks. Maintaining honesty, humility, patience, and accountability over months and years requires something far deeper than social skill. Eventually, repeated actions begin revealing motivations that polished words cannot hide. Excuses become patterns. Broken promises become habits. Self-interest becomes impossible to disguise beneath confidence and charisma. People often regret trusting someone too quickly, yet the warning signs were present from the beginning. They simply overlooked them because they were distracted by charm. A pleasant smile, an engaging conversation, or effortless confidence should never become substitutes for careful observation. True trust should always be earned through consistency, responsibility, and respect shown repeatedly over time, because intentions are ultimately revealed by actions that continue long after first impressions have faded from memory. One of the greatest mistakes people make when judging others is allowing a single moment to define an entire person. A kind gesture convinces them that someone is trustworthy forever. One unpleasant experience causes them to believe another person is completely unreliable. Human beings naturally remember emotional moments more vividly than ordinary ones, but character is not revealed through isolated incidents. It is revealed through repetition. Anyone can be generous once. Anyone can lose their temper once. Anyone can make a promise, offer an apology, or perform an act of kindness. The real question is not what someone does occasionally, but what they do consistently when no one is paying close attention. Boss tells stories that individual moments cannot. Imagine someone who compliments you 9 times but quietly insults your confidence every 10th conversation. Each insult may seem too small to confront. You may even convince yourself that you misunderstood their intention. But if that same experience repeats over weeks or months, it is no longer an accident. It becomes a pattern. The isolated moment may have been easy to dismiss, but repetition transforms coincidence into evidence. Many people people ignore patterns because they are emotionally attached to exceptions. They remember the wonderful vacation, the thoughtful gift, the heartfelt apology while overlooking the dozens of conversations that left them anxious or exhausted. The human mind has a remarkable ability to preserve hope even when reality repeatedly offers reasons for caution. We tell ourselves that people are changing because we desperately want the next interaction to resemble the best one rather than the most common one. This tendency becomes especially dangerous in relationships where inconsistency is mistaken for growth. If someone repeatedly breaks promises but occasionally surprises you with extraordinary affection, those rare moments become powerful enough to erase weeks of disappointment. Instead of asking what happens most of the time, you begin asking, what if this good version of them finally becomes permanent? Hope replaces observation, and exceptions begin controlling your judgment instead of patterns. Reliable people are often predictable in the best possible way. Their words and actions remain aligned across different situations. They treat strangers with the same respect they offer close friends. Their values remain stable whether life is easy or difficult. You know what to expect because their behavior reflects principles rather than changing emotions. This consistency creates trust, not because they are perfect, but because they are dependable. In contrast, people driven primarily by self-interest often change depending on the circumstances. They are respectful when they need something and distant when they no longer benefit from the relationship. They become generous when others are watching but indifferent when attention disappears. Their standards shift according to convenience rather than conviction. Looking at any one interaction may not reveal much, but stepping back and observing the entire pattern exposes the deeper truth. Pulse also reveal your own habits. Perhaps every difficult conversation ends with you apologizing, even when you have done nothing wrong. Perhaps you repeatedly ignore your instincts because you fear conflict. Maybe you continue giving endless second chances while receiving very little accountability in return. Just as the behavior of others forms patterns, so does your response to it. Recognizing these cycles allows you to understand not only who influences your life, but also why certain relationships continue despite repeated disappointment. Time is the greatest test of character because it removes the power of performance. Maintaining a false image requires constant effort, while authenticity naturally repeats itself. Eventually, every person reveals what they truly value through the decisions they make over and over again. Excuses become habits, habits become routines, routines become character. What once appeared to be isolated moments gradually forms a clear picture that cannot be explained away. Instead of asking whether someone has ever been kind, ask how they consistently treat people. Instead of focusing on one apology, notice whether the behavior actually changes afterward. Instead of remembering one inspiring conversation, pay attention to the emotional effect created by dozens of interactions over time. Character is never hidden in extraordinary moments alone. It quietly announces itself through ordinary behaviors repeated so often that they become impossible to ignore. Revealing the truth that isolated incidents can never fully capture. Most people believe that influence belongs to the person who speaks the most. They assume that the strongest individual in a conversation is the one with the quickest response, the loudest opinion, or the longest explanation. Yet history repeatedly shows that those who truly understand human nature often rely on something far more powerful than words. They understand the value of silence. Silence is not emptiness, it is pressure, it is observation, it is space that forces people to reveal what they would otherwise keep hidden. Many conversations become battles of constant talking because people are uncomfortable with quiet moments. The instant silence appears, someone rushes to fill it. They explain more than necessary, justify themselves without being asked, reveal private information, or speak simply to avoid feeling awkward. They mistake constant communication for confidence when in reality it often reflects anxiety. The person who cannot tolerate silence usually ends up exposing far more about themselves than they intended. Notice what happens when you resist the urge to immediately respond. Instead of interrupting every pause with another sentence, simply remain calm and attentive. The other person often begins talking again. They elaborate on their original statement. They attempt to convince you more forcefully. Sometimes they even contradict themselves because they feel uncomfortable with the lack of immediate feedback. Silence encourages people to continue speaking until they unknowingly reveal their true thoughts. This is especially true when someone is hiding something. Deception often depends on controlling the rhythm of a conversation. A dishonest person wants quick reactions, predictable responses, and as few unexpected pauses as possible. When silence interrupts that rhythm, uncertainty begins to grow. The deceiver starts wondering what you are thinking. They become eager to repair an impression that may not even be damaged. In trying too hard to appear convincing, they often reveal inconsistencies that would have remained hidden if the conversation had continued at its usual pace. Silence also protects you from one of the most common conversational mistakes: speaking from emotion rather than intention. When someone insults you, criticizes you, or attempts to provoke you, the natural instinct is to respond immediately. Anger demands expression. Pride seeks defense. Fear wants reassurance. But instant reactions are often driven by emotion rather than wisdom. A brief moment of silence creates distance between feeling and action. It allows your emotions to settle before your words give them permanent form. People frequently underestimate those who speak less. They mistake quiet observation for uncertainty or weakness. Meanwhile, The observer is gathering information that others are freely giving away. Every unnecessary explanation, every emotional outburst, and every careless opinion becomes valuable insight. The quiet person notices patterns while everyone else is focused on being heard. They learn what motivates others, what triggers them, what excites them, and what makes them defensive. This knowledge becomes far more valuable than winning a single conversation. There is another reason silence carries such power. It communicates confidence without requiring proof. Someone who feels secure in their own position does not need to dominate every discussion. They are comfortable allowing others to speak. They do not panic when there is a pause. They do not believe every criticism requires a response or every accusation deserves a defense. Their calmness suggests inner stability, and that stability often commands more respect than endless arguments ever could. Silence also changes the way you listen. Most people are not truly listening during conversations. They are simply waiting for their turn to speak. While the other person is talking, they are preparing responses, defending opinions, or searching for ways to impress. Genuine silence forces you to pay attention. You begin noticing not only the words being spoken, but also the emotions behind them. You hear hesitation, frustration, excitement, insecurity, and confidence hidden beneath ordinary sentences. You become aware of what is missing as much as what is present. Some of the most revealing moments in any relationship occur after a question has been asked and before an answer has been given. Those few seconds of silence often expose uncertainty, discomfort, guilt, or careful calculation. They reveal which subjects create confidence and which create hesitation. They expose priorities that polished speeches attempt to disguise. Those who learn to appreciate silence discover that people often reveal their deepest truths not through the words they carefully choose, but through the quiet moments surrounding those words. Your inner compass is one of the most valuable guides you possess, yet it is also one of the most ignored. From childhood, many people are taught to trust external opinions more than their own perceptions. They are encouraged to seek approval, follow the crowd, and rely on what others think is right. While advice and wisdom from others can be valuable, constantly placing outside voices above your own instincts slowly weakens your ability to recognize truth for yourself. Over time, you begin questioning your own judgment before you even allow yourself to trust it. Every meaningful conversation leaves an impression on your mind. Some strengthen your sense of direction, while others quietly pull you away from it. The danger is not always obvious because manipulation rarely begins with direct control. It often starts with small moments of self-doubt. Someone repeatedly dismisses your opinions, another laughs at your ambitions, someone else convinces you that your concerns are exaggerated or irrational. Individually, these moments appear insignificant. Collectively, they slowly teach you to distrust your own instincts. Your inner compass is not a mysterious force. It is the result of years of experience, observation, memory, and emotional intelligence working together beneath your conscious awareness. Every success, every failure, every disappointment, and every lesson contributes to its accuracy. When something feels wrong after a conversation, it is often because your mind has detected inconsistencies that logic has not yet organized into clear conclusions. Ignoring these signals repeatedly teaches your brain that its own observations are unimportant. Modern life makes protecting this inner guidance increasingly difficult. Every day, countless voices compete for your attention. Social media tells you how successful you should be. Advertisements tell you what you should desire. Public opinion pressures you to think like everyone else. Friends, family, and strangers all offer advice based on their own experiences and beliefs. With so many opinions surrounding you, it becomes easy to confuse other people's expectations with your own genuine convictions. There is an important difference between listening to advice and surrendering your judgment. Wise people remain open to learning from others, but they never abandon the responsibility of thinking for themselves. They examine ideas carefully, compare them with experience, and decide whether those ideas align with reality. They understand that advice is information, not instruction. No one else experiences life through your eyes, carries your responsibilities, or understands every detail of your circumstances. Your final decisions must always belong to you. Protecting your inner compass also means becoming selective about who influences your thinking. Not every opinion deserves equal attention. Some people genuinely want to help you grow, while others project their fears, limitations, and disappointments onto your future. If someone repeatedly encourages you to doubt your abilities, dismiss your ambitions, or ignore your values, their influence deserves careful examination. The voices you allow into your mind gradually become part of your own internal dialogue. This is why solitude can sometimes be more valuable than constant company. Quiet moments give your mind the opportunity to process experiences without outside interference. They allow emotions to settle and deeper understanding to emerge. Many people fear being alone because silence forces them to confront thoughts they have been avoiding. Yet it is often in those quiet moments that your inner compass becomes clearest. Away from pressure, distraction, and endless opinions, you begin hearing your own judgment again. Trusting your intuition does not mean assuming it is always correct. Instinct should never replace evidence or careful thinking. Instead, it should serve as an invitation to observe more closely. When something feels wrong, investigate it. When something feels right, examine why. Confidence grows not from blind certainty, but from repeatedly testing your perceptions against reality. Every time your observations prove accurate, your trust in yourself becomes stronger. Every lesson, whether pleasant or painful, sharpens your ability to recognize truth in future situations. Life will always place you in conversations where appearances are convincing, words are persuasive, and intentions are difficult to read. You will meet people who inspire you, people who challenge you, and people who attempt to influence you for their own benefit. In those moments, your greatest protection will not be perfect knowledge or flawless judgment. It will be your willingness to pause, observe carefully, and remain faithful to your own sense of what feels honest and what feels false. Never allow the noise of the world to become louder than the quiet wisdom within you. Protect your peace as carefully as you protect your ambitions. Guard your confidence against those who profit from your uncertainty. Listen to advice, but never surrender your ability to think independently. The strongest individuals are not those who never make mistakes. They are those who learn from every experience without losing trust in themselves. When you learn to protect your inner compass, every conversation becomes an opportunity to gain wisdom rather than lose yourself. And that is the foundation of lasting strength, clear judgment, and genuine freedom.